This morning's gospel reading, the text on which my sermon is based, it comes from the gospel according to John, the 12th chapter. And I just want to preface this with, one of the issues with the lectionary is that it can occasionally bounce around. We have been consistently reading from the gospel of Luke, but you note that this comes from the gospel of John. So we have kind of left the chronological order that we have been finding our gospel readings in for these last weeks. It's important for us to understand where this reading takes place chronologically in Jesus' life. This is one of the very last things that happens in the life of Jesus according to John's gospel before the Last Supper, before his arrest, his trial, and his crucifixion. Remember, we are in the season of Lent. We are journeying with Christ to the cross, and we are approaching the end of that journey. From the Gospel according to John, the 12th chapter. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, to the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." Grace and peace to you all in the name of our still speaking God, who loves us just the way that we are, and who loves us too much to let us stay that way. Will you pray with me? May these words of my mouth and may the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O God, for it is you and you alone who is our strength and our salvation. Amen. Spring is here! Can I get an amen? Yeah. Spring is here. It has been an unusually cold and unusually snowy winter for us, but spring is finally here. And there are a myriad of signs that this is true. We had a little family vacation, a staycation in Rapid City this weekend. We were up at the Waikiki up there with the kids, and Pam and I got out of the car, we were walking into our hotel, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and it was still 60 degrees. And we knew that spring had come. There are so many signs of spring. If you go outside, you can see the signs of spring. Your eyes will tell you that spring is here when you see the green grass starting to come up from among the dead trees in our yards, in our lawns. And you can see the bright blues of mountain bluebirds who have returned. I've seen a number of bluebirds this year. They're not just the sights of spring, but also the sounds of spring, right? You can hear those same mountain bluebirds singing their songs, all of the songbirds that have returned singing out in the trees. You can hear the occasional motorcycle drive by already. It's not just the sights and the sounds, but there are the smells of spring. Call me crazy, but when the ground finally thaws, I can smell the earth. I can smell the dirt. And I love that smell. And if you go out and you walk north of town on the Mickelson Trail here, you will be able to smell the pines and the spruces and the firs because they are waking up and activating again. The sap is starting to flow and you can smell it. You can smell it. And of course, you can smell that most wonderful smell that begins the season of spring, the meat on the grill when you go outside. Steaks on charcoal. I think that is something that all of us, we know and we recognize, right? The smells of spring. For me, the smell of spring is visceral. It is the way that the beginning of spring really hits home for me. Our sense of smell is interesting that way. Science tells us that the words that we hear or the words that we read, when words come at us, when information comes at us through the eyes and through the ears, that is processed by the thinking part of our brain, by the prefrontal cortex, our analytical side, processes what we read, what we hear. But smells are not. Smells are processed by the amygdala. They are processed by the same part of the brain that processes emotions. Our sense of smell is tied to something more visceral and more emotional. It also has a profound effect on memory formation. That's why when we think about the people we love, when we remember the people we love, we can often remember what they smell like. I was thinking about the smell of my grandma Bartlett's house. I don't know what laundry detergent she used, but she must have used the same laundry detergent for like 20 or 30 years. Because there was that smell of if you were staying at Grandma Bartlett's house and you got into the sheets to stay in one of those guest bedrooms, right? You know that smell that was in the sheets and in the bed. And that same smell you could smell when you gave her a hug because it would be on her clothes. Smell is powerful. Smell is emotional. In our gospel reading this morning, Jesus' friend Mary takes a bottle of expensive perfume and pours it on him. And it is really expensive perfume. The Bible tells us that Judas thought that he could have sold that perfume for 300 denarii. He thought he could get 300 denarii if he sold that perfume. 300 denarii in today's dollars is ballpark about 24 grand. $24,000. It's expensive perfume. Some of the disciples there are upset by what Mary does. They say that the perfume should have been sold and the money given to the poor. After all, it is extremely expensive perfume. It seems like just pouring out the entire bottle all at once. That seems almost wasteful, doesn't it? Knowing what it costs to pour out a whole bottle at once, that seems so wasteful. But Jesus says that Mary has done a beautiful thing for him. In fact, Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached in the whole world, what she has done for me will be told in remembrance of her." Jesus affirms Mary's decision to pour this perfume on him. And that might seem uncharacteristic for Jesus. After all, this scene comes chronologically at about the same time that Jesus was doing the talk that we find in the 25th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, in which Jesus famously tells other people that the way that we treat the hungry and the thirsty and the homeless is the way that we treat him. Right? That's what Jesus said. "For just as you did it to the least of these, brothers and sisters of mine, so you did it to me. And if you did not do it for the hungry and for the thirsty, for the homeless, for the naked, for the sick and in prison, if you did not do it for them, then you did not do it for me." Jesus spent his entire ministry advocating for the poor and for the powerless. So it's not unreasonable for these disciples who have been trained by Jesus to consider the needs of the poor. It's not unreasonable for them to think that pouring $24,000 worth of perfume over somebody is kind of a waste. But Jesus defends Mary because Jesus understands what it is that Mary is doing for him. Jesus understands what it means to Mary, what it means to him. See, Mary is no fool. Mary understands what's in store for Jesus. At the close of the 11th chapter of John's Gospel, a number of scribes and Pharisees, government officials have gotten together and they have agreed that Jesus has to go. There's a price on Jesus' head. Jesus knows it, his disciples knows it, and yet Jesus nevertheless has decided to come to Jerusalem for the Passover. Mary knows what's in store for Jesus. As I told you before, this scene takes place immediately before the Last Supper, immediately before Jesus is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, Lord, if there is any way, let this cup pass from me. Immediately before he is arrested and tried and crucified on a cross by Roman soldiers. Mary understands what lies ahead for him. Mary understands the pain that he is about to endure. And she wants to do something extravagant, to demonstrate her great love for this man who has loved her so deeply in turn. She wants Jesus to know how deeply she cares about him. She wants him to feel deeply, extravagantly loved. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that nobody here this morning has purchased for themselves a $24,000 bottle of perfume. Is that accurate? If you have a $24,000 bottle of perfume sitting at home, I want you to raise your hand right now because you are going to get a visit from the pastor to talk about increasing your pledge. No? Probably not. But we all have that in our lives which is extremely precious to us, extremely valuable to us. And some of those things are material things that have a really big price tag attached to them. And some of them are material things that have a very, very tiny price tag but have an awful lot of emotional or sentimental value. And some of those things are not material things at all, those treasures that are most precious to us. But it's by offering those treasures that are most precious to us, to others, that we can most clearly communicate our love for them. You know, one of the things that marriage counselors will tell you is that it's not enough in a marriage, or in any relationship really for that matter, to just say the words, I love you. What matters is less that the words are expressed than that the words are received, that the words are heard. Marriage counselors will talk to you about love languages and how each person has a particular way in which they are most able to receive an I love you. And it's important for us to communicate to them in that way. To not just say the words I love you, but to make sure that they feel it. Love expressed is not sufficient. It has to be received and felt and understood in order for it to have any meaning. Mary, in our gospel reading this morning, she expressed her love in this profound and lovely way. And Jesus, he obviously heard it. Right? He received it, he understood it, and he felt it. And that is why Jesus said that wherever and whenever the gospel is preached, what Mary has done for me will always be remembered. And most importantly, Jesus is going to remember what Mary did for him. I said that this took place in Jesus' last days in Jerusalem. In the days that would follow, he would be arrested and crucified. This really strong perfume, and so much of it, it would have lasted for a really long time. A pound of spikenard perfume, it would have stuck with Jesus for days and days to come. It would be a much more pleasant smelling equivalent of getting sprayed by a skunk, right? This is gonna cling. The smell is going to cling to Jesus. That means the smell of this perfume would have filled the room during the Last Supper. As Jesus broke bread and said, "This is my body broken for you," the smell of that perfume would have been in the noses of all of the disciples and of Jesus himself. As Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, "Lord, if there is any way, let this cup pass from me." That smell of Mary's perfume would have wafted on the breeze through the garden, and Jesus would have smelled it then too. As Jesus stood before the high priest and before Pilate and was accused of treason and insurrection and any other thing that they could come up with, Mary's perfume would have still lingered as a reminder of her great love for him. As he was on the cross, nails in his hands and his feet, surrounded by the sights and sounds and smells of crucifixion, even there, Jesus would have caught an occasional breaths of that perfume that Mary had given him. And as he breathed his last and said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit," he would have sensed that lingering fragrance and been reminded that he had been so greatly loved. That's what matters here in this story. It's not about the cost of the perfume. This story is not a study in economics. This is a study in love, in the way that we express love, ensuring that somebody receives it in such a way that it will linger and continue with them in their darkest days. And to Jesus, nothing that we do, not even giving our money to the poor, really matters unless we do it out of a heart filled with love. The motivation matters. If we don't do it out of love, we're not doing it right. Jesus said to his disciples, "I tell you the truth, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what Mary has done will be told in remembrance of her." That is why I've told you this story again today. Because this scene, Jesus wanted us to understand, this scene is at the heart of the gospel. We too can be like Mary. When our hearts are filled with love, we can offer love to others in such a way that it will stick with them through the darkest moments of their life. So that as they are going through their own struggles, as they are, as Jesus said, each day taking up a cross of their own, they will know that they are loved. Amen.